All right, guys, I want to give you my Bitcoin price prediction. Now, about 4 years ago, I was on the fence with Bitcoin. I didn't fully understand it, and I really saw it as a player versus player game. For some people to win, other people had to lose. And just over 2 years ago, I started to research it deeply, and I realized this really is the apex asset, okay? This is the best store of value you can find, and we're still very early on the adoption curve. This is the time where money is built. And so I started buying up Bitcoin aggressively about 2 years ago, okay? So here's my prediction, okay? Because some people are like, oh, but Bitcoin's 100,000, 110,000, so expensive. It will be in 5 or 10 years, okay? 5 to 10 years, the idea you can buy a Bitcoin, you could have bought a Bitcoin for 100,000, 110,000 is gonna be the same as buying a house for $110,000. You remember when your grandma or your uncle was like, oh, we got this house in the family for $20,000. You're like, that's crazy, right? And that happened over 50, 60 plus years. This will be condensed fast in the next 5 to 10 years. So just think of Bitcoin as, it's digital real estate. It's finite, okay? Think of it like I could buy a house right now for $100,000. That's the right mindset. If you create that unlock, it's gonna make sense, okay? So that's what's gonna happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And in the next 20 years, it's like buying one Bitcoin's like a mansion, okay? One Bitcoin's like a mansion in the next 20 years, okay? So Bitcoin is gonna do very, very well. Now, it's always harder to make a short-term prediction, like what's gonna happen in the next 6 to 12 months, but I do think we're gonna break 200K soon. I think it's gonna happen fast. And the first reason is that if you look at the history of Bitcoin, okay, the post-halving price, 18 months later, just explodes. So last cycle, we did an 8X from the post-halving price and hit like 69,000. Before that, it was a 30X. Before that, it was like a 50 or 100X, okay? So right now, going forward is when things explode, and crazy enough, the interest rates haven't even come down. So liquidity hasn't really fully hit yet, okay? In the last cycle, the interest rates dropped a year and a half before the price peaked. So I actually think, some people think, oh, it's gonna be a 4-year cycle. I think the 4-year cycle is done. It's over. It's not gonna fit a 4-year cycle anymore. It's gonna behave much differently. So don't get in that trap of like the 4-year cycle, trying to time the top, sell, buy back in. And furthermore, I don't think we're gonna see 77% drawdowns anymore, okay? I think that we'll have big pullbacks, yeah, 20, 30, 40%, but we're not gonna see Bitcoin go from 200,000 to 40,000. It's not gonna be a thing anymore, okay? The last cycle, so many things happened for Bitcoin to crash 77%, okay? They had the largest rate hike in history, like a 22x rate hike. There was a massive FTX scandal, which just painted a horrible brush across the whole crypto landscape. China was banning mining. It was just so many things happened in tandem that people kind of got spooked, right? So now what's gonna happen is, like, now you have the US government is endorsing Bitcoin. They're like looking at doing a Bitcoin stockpile. You have BlackRock and big financial institutions looking at Bitcoin as a recognized global asset. So the game's just different, right? And we're still very, very early on the adoption curve, okay? So if you look at the search history or the search volume for Bitcoin, it's actually really, really low right now, okay? A lot of people that are in the Bitcoin space, they think everyone's thinking about Bitcoin. No, they're not, okay? It's a third of what it was in peak mania in 2021, okay? So retail investors are not really paying attention to Bitcoin. They're not paying attention, okay? So once Bitcoin breaks 150K, that's when the headlines rip, and that's when the mania starts to happen and people get sucked in. So Bitcoin will hit 150K, and then likely it's gonna break 200K, and it's gonna happen this year or at latest Q1 2026. That's sort of my prediction. That's what I think is gonna happen. And now with Trump, his new big, beautiful bill, and the insane amount of spending that's gonna happen, right? He's committed to insane amounts of spending. That's very bullish on Bitcoin, right? Because they're gonna have to print tons and tons and tons of money. And so Bitcoin's finite. That's gonna force the price of Bitcoin to go up. That is a very, very bullish scenario for Bitcoin. So I think we're gonna for sure see 150K soon, and we probably will break 200K. And when there are pullbacks and drawdowns, if Bitcoin hits 200K, you know, maybe we'll go back to 120, 130. It's not going to go back to 70K. Okay. It's just that there's too much buying happening right now. The supply is so finite. The ETF customers of Bitcoin have proven to be very, very sticky. Okay. They're not buying and selling. BlackRock has absorbed $150+ billion of Bitcoin, and they have positive inflows pretty much every single day. So that's sort of my prediction. In 5 to 10 years, 100K Bitcoin is a house. It's like buying a house. Right now you can buy a house for 100 grand via digital real estate, via Bitcoin. And in 20 years, it's like buying mansions, okay? Just, you know. And here's the thing is I know a lot of people are talking about XRP, but XRP, like I can get this much XRP, right, for this much Bitcoin, so I want to go and get XRP, okay? So, do you remember that episode from Family Guy where Peter has the choice between getting a boat? He can get this nice yacht, or he can get the mystery box, because it could be anything. It could even be a boat. That's XRP, okay? I would not touch XRP with a 10-foot pole. Could it do well? Yeah, maybe, but it's still like 40% of the supply is controlled by insiders, right? 40% is controlled by insiders. They've been talking about being like the frickin' rails to global banking for 10 years. They've made little to no traction, okay? I don't think it's gonna happen. I've talked to people that own XRP, and they couldn't really give me one solid thesis on why XRP will do well. It will only really do well if it's just kind of like seen as just like let's just market XRP. But the actual underlying use case for XRP, I think is completely overblown. So I just would hate to see you put your load in XRP and that shit not perform well, while in the next 10, 20 years, Bitcoin has cemented itself as the most dominant, powerful asset class available. And Bitcoin still has so much upside, okay? We are so early. We're at 4% adoption on Bitcoin. We are early. And if you really want to learn how to build wealth and make money, right? You need to invest where you're unshakable. If things go down 20, 30%, you're excited. Yes, I can buy more. If I held some of these other stuff, right? If I held some of these other things, right? And it dropped, I would kind of panic. I don't know. I'm shaky on this one, right? You do not want to be in that situation. If you want to experience greater volatility, greater returns, go to the Bitcoin treasuries, go to a leverage play like MicroStrategy, right? Which is taken on smart leverage to buy up Bitcoin and outperform Bitcoin, or even MetaPlanet, right? If that's your prerogative, you want greater upside, that's probably the most asymmetric way to do it. And funny enough, I do actually have a large position in MicroStrategy. I have a very large position in MicroStrategy, and I have a tiny bit of MetaPlanet. So if that's kind of your goal, I would look at that. Sure, I mean, if you're just like, oh, I want to put a few grand in something and maybe treat it as a gamble, you can, but like to really build real wealth, you have to be putting in a sizable amount, and you can't be putting in a sizable amount if you have shaky conviction. So I think Bitcoin is going to 1 to 2 million, okay, in the next 5 to 7 years, okay? It could be up to 5 million in the next 10 years. And I think these next 6 to 12 months are fucking exciting. The game's changed. The 4-year cycle is not gonna be a thing anymore, okay? The future halvings are not gonna have a huge influence on the price dynamics, okay? Because the supply is so minuscule compared to the demand. So we're gonna break 150K, and then I think we'll likely break 200 grand. And like if things get like hyper bullish, we could enter the 300 to 400K territory, okay? So like base 150, like very, very solid 200, and then like super bullish, we could be breaking into like the 400K territory, okay? In the next 6 to 12 months. And again, it's not this 4-year cycle. No, I think Bitcoin's gonna have a very, very strong run up for the next 12 months, maybe even the next 18 months, because we haven't even dropped the interest rates, okay? And the money printing is gonna be insane with this big, beautiful, we're doing the big, beautiful bill, okay? It's gonna be insane. So I'm just telling you, I think right now is a good time to lay the position down. But again, if you're gonna lay a position down, you have to be unshakable. Do not invest in this just off this video. go and do your research, become unshakable on Bitcoin. If you see Bitcoin drop 20% and you're freaking out, what are you doing? You know, you should be getting excited. Otherwise, don't put money into it. If a 20%, 30% drawdown in Bitcoin causes you to have a tantrum, then you're shaky. You should be excited, okay? Let me see if I can scrape together a couple more bucks to buy a little bit more, okay? So that's sort of my video. In 5 to 10 years, I'll just say in 7 years, Bitcoin for 100 grand is like owning a house, and in 20 years is like mansions, okay? Think of it like that. Go and buy your Bitcoin houses and mansions after doing research. Take care.